Today's discussion is your first 90 days in a new leadership role. And it's actually meant for you, for those of you that are considering or already looking into shifting into a new position from where you've been for the last few years. And it's actually a 90-day roadmap on how you can accelerate your success in a new leadership role. So let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully this will be a discussion. And if you have any questions, you can submit them using the chat window or the Q&A. And then Susan will be moderating questions at the end of today's discussion. And we are going to be allocating a few minutes to answer any questions you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. The idea of this came up when I started seeing all these highly publicized tech layoffs. And sadly, many of my connections on LinkedIn have been actually telling me that they're now open to work. And many of them are managers and have been managers for a while in different types of companies that have been laying off in the last few months. And as a result, I started looking at this particular content and came back to this quote. When you're in management, you're not just doing a management of people, you're doing two different jobs. You are managing and leading. And there's a difference between management and leadership. And this quote from Peter Drucker kind of gives a difference between management and being a leader. Management is about doing things right, whereas leadership is doing the right things. And if you could really consider, a great manager does both the right way. The issue is, if you look at many organizations and their number one issue today and why people either are quiet quitting or have had to do massive layoffs, it's because they have lots of bad managers and not enough good leaders. And often this is where brings organizations into trouble, no matter what size they are at. As soon as the market starts shifting, you start seeing some things that go not so well for the organization. They actually start to suffer and then have to go into these massive layoffs that we've seen in the last few months. So our goal for today is to help you understand a blueprint to accelerate your success if you're already about to shift into a new position or you're within your first 90 days in a new role. And hopefully you have gone from one management role into another, and that's what you're about to do or what you have you're in the middle of doing already. So we'll discuss, number one, the current situation, the job market. What does it look like? And, is it really in your favor or not? And also we'll talk about the 90-day roadmap, and then we'll give you some key takeaways for those of you who are in the process of doing this transition or planning this transition in 2023. First of all, here's some statistics. This is actually as of last month from the Bureau of Labor Statistics here in US. And this is specifically for the US market. So look at this, just in January alone, at the end of January, last month, 82,000 professional and business services job openings. These are brand new job openings. And this includes many management roles, project management, program management, product management, all sorts of management roles of different shapes and sizes, and 82,000 new jobs for managers, experienced managers. And new project management jobs, according to a PMI study that was published in about 2 years ago, stating that new project management jobs are projected to grow at an annual rate of 7% between 2021 all the way to the next decade through 2031. So many of these 82,000 jobs that openings in January are specifically project management roles. So and also another study from PMI is showing that 70,400 openings for project management specialists are projected each year. That's a 7%, is roughly over 70,000 jobs each year on average for the next decade. And geographically speaking, the DC metro area, which is where I reside, is the strongest for project managers. And as a matter of fact, it's among the top 2 tech job markets in US right now. So if you're a technical project manager or a product manager or a program manager, you're going to be in a very sought after by different employers who have openings, and they need more people with your talent that not only have technical domains of expertise, but also are great managers of people, great people managers. So it's a strong job market is the bottom line. So even though it looks like it's not such a great time for you if you have these domains of expertise that I'm talking about, maybe it's the right time for you to start looking if you are unhappily employed right now in a management position, or you have technical domains of expertise and are also managing people. The objective of this particular talk is to talk about what the 90 days would look like and how to prepare so that you can actually not only differentiate yourself as you are interviewing, get the offer, but then deliver that once you actually start coming on board, that you can now put together very quickly your 90-day roadmap of what you need to do in order to ensure success and make this a smooth transition and build up your reputation within this new organization as a can-do manager. So we're going to talk about how to assess and why the need to assess the company that you're about to go into, and not just the strategy, but also the company's culture before you even accept the job. Learn how things get done within the company, build relationship with the key stakeholders that you need to meet as soon as you get in, and establish confidence within your team, and also take ownership of the projects that you're going to be managing. And whether these are projects about product development or projects that have to do with anything else that are needed, and ensure that you understand the criticality of those things getting done in a timely manner, and pick some small wins that you can accomplish within your first 90 days. And of course, as a project manager or program manager, the issue is that you need to have not just domains of expertise of hard skills, which are technology and maybe a few other things that are hard skills, but also that you need to show that you have the right soft skills so that you can clearly communicate with different types of stakeholders within the company, and often sometimes also outside of the company, whether they're on the supply side of the company or demand side of the organization that you're about to go into. Depending on the role that you're going to be considering, you may be doing any combination of these things, and the soft skills are critical for you to show and demonstrate that you are indeed a great people manager. And as I mentioned, right now, management positions and people with experience and having great people skills and soft skills are going to be in high demand, and even higher demand for those of you who have technical domains of expertise as well. So leaders in transition typically the reason why transitions are risky for most people that are not necessarily prepared to do a transition is because there's a lot of risk. And Michael Watkins, who actually published a book called The First 90 Days, one of the bestsellers, actually published an article on Harvard Business Review that preceded the book. And this is a quote that says why most leaders fail in making successful transitions. And that is because most leaders, and the studies and the research he did showed that most leaders that failed in doing a smooth transition going from one organization to another is because they relied on the skills and strategies that worked for them in the past in previous organizations, and they brought them in and tried to apply them into the current organization. And that's the number one mistake. So don't make that mistake. You need to assess where the company is at and what is the company's culture before you decide what is the right way to come in and succeed in your new role in that new organization. And so here's your 90-day roadmap. We're going to talk about 5 different phases. And what we're going to find out is you may be iterating across these 5 phases over time. And that's why they're kind of overlap together, because there will be often you will need to go back and forth between these in the way that you're doing, because as you are coming into the organization, there's a lot of discovery that needs to be done. And some of it is within the company, and much of it is going to be outside of the company itself. And you need to make sure that you're doing both, getting clarity as to what experts and analysts outside of the organization are saying is the right path and the right course of action versus what the executives and senior managers within the organization are telling everyone within the building that they need to do next. And often you need to ensure that there's clarity and alignment in those things if the organization is going to be successful in whatever stage they're in. So we're going to talk about what goes on typically in each one of these phases next. And as you have any questions, make sure that you can submit them so we can actually answer them during Q&A. So very quickly, first thing that I mentioned is it's important to understand what type of transition you're doing. You may be going from one organization that is in any one of these 5 different things. You're maybe currently in a startup and you're going into a different organization, or you're about to step into an organization that is either a startup or is in turnaround mode, or is trying to accelerate their growth and trying to scale their business model, or trying to realign their business model, because right now, a lot of the shifts in the market and a lot of shifts in buyer behavior are against them, and they're trying to figure out how to align and remain customer-centric to remain relevant. Or they may be looking to sustain the business and continue to sustain the success that they've been achieving and trying to retain customers because acquisition is not so easy based on current market conditions. So number one, you have to assess where is your current company at in any of these 5 steps, and realize that whatever your company is at, the one that you're leaving and the one that you're coming into, you have different types of situations, and that is going to impact the mindset of the people that you're going to be interacting with. And it's going to impact not just the key stakeholders that you're reporting to, but it's also going to impact your peers and everybody else that is going to that you're going to be managing. And it's very important to understand this even before you accept the job offer, so that if there's additional training that you need to do or learning that you need to do before you go in, you can begin that process even before you accept the offer. And this is actually from Michael Watkins, who in his book, The First 90 Days, he stated that these are the 5 different type of transitions that you could be facing within any organization. So assess which one of these you're about, the type of situation that your company that you're going to go in is key in order to understand whether it's they have cultural issues and barriers to break down before they can actually do what they need to do, or if it's an issue of understanding how to execute on their current strategy and whether or not their current strategy is the right one for their situation. Any of these things are about creating alignment or better alignment within the decision makers and the people who are actually taking action on the things that they're being directed to do. So let's move on to the prepare phase. The preparation phase is about discovering what state your target company where you're about to accept your job. You may be already in the process of interviewing, in the process of getting an offer, or maybe you already have an offer and you may have multiple offers. If that's the situation, you need to figure out which one to take based on this information. So part of the preparation phase, you begin to do before you even begin or before you accept the job. So number one, evaluate the company culture, the vision and strategy, and also being able to maybe conduct some market research to identify what people in their industry and the experts and the people who are tracking the market are saying about the company itself. The outside view into that organization. And it's fairly easy to do if you're about to come into a publicly traded company, because there's lots of information you can get that is easily accessible out there from SEC and other databases that are open. Harder when you're going into a company that is privately held and operated. It means that you have either family-owned business or it's owned by a private equity firm. And then you need to do maybe additional research on the private investors and what they invest in and what is their expertise in this industry and market. But that requires market research. And also working with your manager, whoever is going to be your hiring manager, whoever you're going to be reporting to, make sure you not only identify the OKRs and the KPIs of what you need to do in the first year, But break it down even further into what are these things that you're going to achieve in the first 90 days, and then ensure that you're requesting the right level of resources needed to get the job done, and the funding that you would need to do things like maybe acquire tools that the current organization is not already using today that will help everyone that you're working with achieve those objectives and those performance, succeed in those performance indicators that you're going to be tracking for yourself and for your teams. And get all the resources and funding, and make sure this is part of your request before you accept the offer. It's not just about accepting your compensation level, but also the level of resources and tools that will need to be turned on as soon as you come in. Get people trained, properly trained, so they can start using these tools the right way, and also the funding needed to do additional things that need to be done as soon as you come in, so that you can start really focusing on creating early wins. Often, we normally think about just negotiating our salary, and we forget all the other things that are critical for us to ensure that we make significant impact as soon as we come in. And it is the difference between coming in and crawling in a new position versus starting running from day one as you come in. So preparation phase is key to scope what you're going to be doing, but also request the right level of funding and the right level of resources, so that it's clear to everyone before you come in what you're going to be doing right immediately as you come on board, if you were to accept that offer. And it puts you in a very strong position, because just doing this alone will actually often get you a job offer compared to anyone else who's not doing that. They're just concerned about what's in it for me kind of thing, and not defining how is it that you're going to actually make significant impact within the organization from day one. Preparation phase is key in order to get the offer when you're in the interviewing process. Assessment. Once you do accept the offer and you're beginning, now you begin to assess even further, doing further discovery about key internal stakeholders that you need to communicate, and determine who they are and how often you need to communicate, and the kind of communication that you need to provide. The way you would communicate to an executive is different than the way you would communicate with senior managers or with your peers or people that you're going to be working with, that you're going to be managing tasks and activities. All of this is key to ensure that you can execute on whatever it is that that's in the to-do list and your action plan for the next 90 days. Also assess the maturity of processes. You find out that, usually when you're in the startup, literally there are no processes, right? Everything is chaos, and then trying to create order from chaos takes work, because there's no processes and no one really knows how to proceed in doing what's next. On the other hand, when you come into large organizations, or maybe even some bureaucratic organizations, often there's too much process. And too much process is not necessarily good. Sometimes there's barriers to achieving things, because they have guidelines and processes that may not apply based on what you need to do in the next 90 days. And you might need to request a hall pass, permission from your executives to bypass some of the current processes, and maybe start really focusing on creating small wins, so that you can actually prove that there's too many processes, and sometimes they need to be removed or updated ongoing. But definitely want to meet with the sponsors of your projects. They could be either customers when you're actually selling something into the marketplace. Sponsors can also be the people who are your partners, that are actually enabling you to actually get things done, because you're delivering certain things that they need, and that's that their users need or their stakeholders need. And this could be literally project sponsors. So often you need to also figure out what are their pain points, and assess what is the perceived value of the deliverables, and how is it that you're going to reduce the time to deliver value to them, where the value is based on what they're telling you directly is the most valuable thing that you can deliver in the next 3 months or so. And then create a roadmap of planning as to how you're going to achieve that, the things that you're going to deliver to them that deliver the most value to your stakeholders, your users, your buyers, or your sponsors, any combination of those, and then also to the business stakeholders that you've identified. Then you move on to the plan phase. In the plan phase, you're looking to understand the current climate within your industry, within your business, do some competitive analysis, look at your supply chain and access to strategic partners that can help you do more with less when you need to, or achieve even more without having to build everything from scratch. So either identification of new suppliers, new partners that will help you get things done quicker without you having to task people within the building to do a lot more because you're trying to do everything from scratch. And do it based on the target market. Also, understand, what are those, does those KPIs and OKRs still make sense? Or have you found something that there needs to be a change in the current OKRs and KPIs that you agreed upon, as well as ensure that you have everything that you need to get started and start going into implementation. So the planning phase is where you would put together your project plan and you would verify the requirements or the needs and all the things that are part of scoping what needs to get done, and then putting together the work breakdown structures or whatever the plan is for what needs to get done and who needs to be involved, and ensure that all the resources are in place before you begin implementation. Once you go into the implementation phase, you're now moved into the act phase. And the act phase is just about implementing as fast and furious as you can, because you now start ramping up on your resources, managing the tasks and activities that are being done by your team or teams, and start promoting small wins. And the small win is not necessarily a deliverable, but let's say you brought in a new tool and you got everybody trained on the new tool, and now everybody's using the new tool that will get you to where you need to be. And that's a small win, right? It's not the ultimate deliverable, but it's something that will accelerate getting to that deliverable because of what you've done. And you've identified something that will shortcut the time that will take to deliver, because now they're using a much better tool that no one has used before. And that's something that you can start claiming. These are all things that you need to start figuring out. What are the small wins that you can bring in, and make sure you promote them within your higher ups, whether you're at the executive level or your direct managers, your senior managers, your peers, because this may be something that that they can actually start using on their own. And it's something that you would share with others who are trying to do similar things across other functions within the same organization. And continue to engage with your sponsors and users to evaluate their feedback and guide decisions as to what to do next. Constantly, you're going to be looking for information as to what you need to accelerate because it's working well, and your users and the stakeholders are liking it. Your sponsors are liking it. What are the things that you need to eliminate because they're not really delivering the value that they thought they would get, and what things you would need to consider doing next because it was not part of your scope. These are all combination of things, and if you're working in an agile approach, you're doing this at the end of every sprint or iteration because you're doing this as part of your retrospective. So build in a retrospective on a periodic basis, even if you're not working on an agile. Most managers today are actually in a hybrid environment where they're actually using some waterfall to run projects and some agile projects at the same time. And many times you're actually managing teams working in a hybrid environment in today's world. And then you go into the measure phase, and the measure is about figuring out how close you are to achieving the OKRs and the KPIs that you agreed upon, and comparing the outcomes to those metrics that you have agreed upon. And also figuring out what additional things are new that you can put into your roadmap of what's next, not what you're going to be working right now in the next 90 days, but what after your first 90 days and you accomplished what you thought, what's going to be done after in the next 90 days or the next few months after you have completed your first 90 days. and make sure that you're preparing your teams to make quick adjustments as needed to improve outcomes. Begin the work of whatever is next. That's basically what you need to do in the measure phase, is to collect that information and make sure you discuss it, not just with your supervisors, but also with your peers. Because if you don't have, let's say, the equivalent of a PMO, project management office, and that's your role, is that you're actually managing a certain set of projects, it's useful to be able to actually share best practices, new methodologies that are not used by everyone, and then see if it might work for other parts of the business as well. Sharing that information is part of the key purpose as to why you want to have a formal PMO in place within any organization. So that's the fifth and final phase. And this is, usually you get this once you are well into implementation. You can report early wins, but also report the status as to how you're doing towards achieving all of the metrics that you have agreed upon at the very beginning. So the key takeaways today is that if you are in the process of either accepting a new job, this is information that you should be using even as you are currently in the interview process. And then make sure you assess, as you're interviewing, assess the company's culture, assess the current company situation, and your role should be, when you're actually interviewing, try to figure out in which of the 5 different phases that we talked about in that STARS framework that I spoke about from Michael Watkins, what are you about to go into? Are you going into a company that is in a turnaround mode? Are they trying to scale their growth? Are they trying to sustain, just maintain whatever they're doing right now? Because they're mostly just going sideways just because of the market. They're not necessarily growing, but they don't necessarily want to decrease in size. They're maybe going sideways, and that means you just have to sustain and keep it up for as long until the market's conditions change in your favor. So these are all the things that you want to do very early on, and these tools and this framework can help you in, even as you're you're in the interview phase. They can also help you in getting multiple offers, not just one offer. And the job market right now is very strong right now for those of you that have both management expertise and technical domains of expertise that people are seeking right now. And there's job openings for people with experience. And there's going to be a talent shortage in the next year or so. So I would say, if you're currently not happy in your current work environment and you want to make those changes, figure out what type of environment you want to work in next, and then look for those opportunities, because they are there and they're expected to be there the rest of this year. And this is despite inflation, despite the possible recession that most people have been sort of like preparing for. And in reality, most experts, what they're saying right now is the job market is so strong right now that they believe that if there is a recession, it's actually going to be a very soft recession. And recessions are typical in any you look throughout our history, and recessions happening every few years. Some of them are deeper than others. This one, it looks like, for right now, most experts and economists are saying it might be kind of a soft recession. So it's not going to be the one that we had, a few years ago. Right now, indications are that, at least what's going on, yes, there are lots of people that are laying off, unfortunately. And I'm sorry if you're actually in that position right now, but the job market is very strong for those of you that have experience in management and also have technical domains of expertise. So that is the bottom line, the key takeaway. And it's actually your role to kind of define, if you're unhappy where you're at right now, what kind of environment and what type of company would you consider going to next? And what are the things that you're looking for? Is, make sure it's clear, and make sure that you're actually doing some research to ensure you understand the companies that you're about to go into. Don't just apply for the sake because they have a job opening that matches your skills. Make sure you assess the company's culture and their strategy and their situation using the same frameworks that I presented earlier in this discussion. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions. And Susan, I don't know if we have any questions so far.
We do, yes. Thank you, Hector. Always a great presentation. Thank you. We did have a question. How can we decode organization politics and unwritten rules in the first 90 days?
That's a great question. So normally you would say that the more bureaucratic companies are usually in highly regulated industries. So if you're a government contractor and basically providing bodies into a specific federal agency, for example, which is very typical here in the DC metro area, expect a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of politics. But if you're actually outside of that, you want to get into other non-bureaucratic environments. I would be looking for like a mid-market company, so mid-sized company. And usually you can distinguish those because you would know them by revenue and by the number of employees. Usually mid-market companies have less than 1,000 employees in place overall, the entire company. And once you get into a company that is thousands or maybe tens of thousands of employees, usually the larger they are, the more bureaucratic they are. There are some exceptions, but often these are the companies that right now are laying off because they were, in many cases, overvalued. And right now, the opportunities are mostly within mid-market companies. So it's important to understand that if you're looking for less bureaucracy and companies that are currently hiring, look for a mid-market company. And a mid-market company usually has revenues already of maybe 50 million all the way up to $1 billion. That's the range. It's a very broad range, but look for revenue. And then the size, they would have already maybe 50 employees all the way up to maybe about 1,000 employees, or maybe slightly higher than that. But they're considered mid-size. They have budgets. They have the need to hire experienced managers, good managers that can keep the morale of their teams, because most of these mid-market companies right now are either in sustaining mode. I talked about the sustaining mode, or they're trying to scale the growth, and they're trying to just create realignment. Those are the three modes that most mid-market companies are in, and they're going to be in for the next few years. They're trying to remain relevant, so they're sustaining, or they're trying to realign to actually get to a more scalable business model, or they're trying to scale their growth right now. And this is why you want to consider mid-market companies, because they tend to be less bureaucratic and also are in one of these three modes that they're looking to bring in great managers that have great technical domains of expertise as well.
Great. Thank you, Hector. As a follow-up to that, the attendee did post the question is for mid-sized companies with about 1,000 employees.
Yes, that's correct. So 1,000 employees, sometimes they go a little bit more, but I would say 1,000 employees, they that the next level of growth is going to be where they're going to try to get to maybe 5,000 or higher. If growth goes well for them, they're going to grow very quickly from 1,000 to 5,000, or maybe even above that number. And that means they need to do a lot of different activities across the entire business to make sure they're getting ready to go into that scalable growth mode. That is one of the 5 modes that they're in. So you can either go into a company that's already there, or take one of the ones that are in sustaining mode, that in the next 3 years want to be in that scalable growth mode. And the realignment also, they're looking to realign to get into that scalable growth mode that we talked about earlier.
Great. Thank you, Hector. Another person is following up, or a similar question. My company is 1.3 billion revenue with 3,000 employees. Do you consider, with this size and revenue, a mid-sized company?
That's still in the upper range. So the answer is yes. You're right at the edge, and you may be now becoming more bureaucratic, and maybe that's what you need to assess. If you're unhappy working for that type of company, and because it's bureaucratic, maybe you need to move to a company that is within the middle market range, that is less bureaucratic. And there may be, depending on the industry that you're in and your expertise, there may be those type of companies looking for great managers from those organizations that have already made it to, to that level where they want to get to. But now you can bring that knowledge and that expertise to help them get to where your current company is at. But that is assuming that right now you're unhappy within your company. If you happen to like your environment, chances are your current company may be looking to get into the next level of growth. And as you know, in this environment, it's about, just reaching the $1 billion mark in revenue is not enough, right? If your executives are trying to become the next $1 trillion company or get to the tens of billions, you may be in that scalable growth mode, and maybe opportunities coming within your company. And if you're happy in that environment, maybe that's something that you can do. The other thing is that many of these companies that are in the size is they're looking to get into by actually starting a new line of business, and they're looking for people that can actually bring into this new line of business, which will be maybe completely organic growth, but they're bringing managers to actually lead that new line of business. So depending on where your company is doing next, look for those opportunities, because if they're actually looking to grow, many of these companies that are at the size where you're at are looking to their next level of growth is by starting a new line of business that you haven't had before. But your skills are still going to be needed if you have great management and technical domains of expertise that new line of business will need to move forward to actually achieve the growth that your company, the holding company, will actually be looking for.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Hector. We do have another question regarding new opportunities. Where do you feel is the best place to look for them? Still LinkedIn or other sources?
I would say it just depends. Right now, currently, if you look at those management positions, if you look at underneath what the publication is, public information, you can look it up on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They publish this and updates on a monthly basis. Usually at the beginning of each month, they will publish what just happened, what they saw happen as far as exits and transitions. And PMI, if you're a project manager, PMI publishes transitions of project management specialists, their members. And what they're saying right now is that PMI is saying that a high number of their members are looking to transition, make these type of transitions that we're speaking about today, this year. So those may be sources of information where you're looking. And, most of these are, when they're looking for hard to find talent, they're posting in not just one job posting platform, not just LinkedIn or Monster or Dice or whatever those job boards are. They're actually usually posting across maybe 2 or 3 job boards, but also they're working with recruiting firms, talent recruiting firms that specialize in bringing qualified candidates. And these, you need to understand, these are your partners, right? If you can find these talent search firms that these companies are hiring, they, usually they will post their own jobs and have confidential employer, because they're not going to be able to disclose immediately who the hiring company is. But often look for these type of firms that have the type of jobs that you want, and then just let them be clear with them. What type of organization would you want to be in, and what is their mode? If you do say, I'm looking for a company that is funded for growth, to me, it's clear that you're looking for a mid-market company that is in that scalable growth mode because they just got funding and now they need to execute on that, on growth for the next 3 to 5 years. Because normally any company that raises any kind of round for growing their business, it has at least 3 to 5 years to achieve that. And it's best to identify those that just got that funding, because they're going to be looking to bring in the people that can help them achieve the growth that their investors are expecting in order for them to get the ROI.
Hector, thank you so much for your time and for your presentation.
Thanks so much, Susan, for hosting this, and thanks everyone for joining me today. Have a great week.